welcome back. This isn't quite the video I was expecting to make at this stage. I was hoping to be moving on to the paint job, but I've got a little bit of a problem that's cropped up on me last night, and I thought it'd make an interesting video to show how I'm going to deal with it, because you don't tend to see too much of this sort of thing on other YouTube channels. So hopefully this will be a bit of interest for those of you that have not really come across this sort of thing, or you're sort of dipping your toes into lights and stuff like that. One thing that you'll almost certainly come across in your time putting lights and stuff inside models is you'll get LED failures, you'll get component failures. There's nothing you can do to protect yourself against it. There's all this theory about 24-hour stress testing and soak testing and all the rest of it, and whilst yes, testing LEDs serves a purpose in that it will immediately show you a duff LED within the first few hours of its life, it's not a silver bullet. You know, it doesn't mean that just because those LEDs ran for 24 hours that now they're going to run for another 15,000 hours. It just doesn't work that way. There's no guarantee that all of those LEDs that have been tested for a day or a week aren't going to fail the very next time you switch them on. That's just life. There's nothing you can do about that. So what we can do about it though is when they fail is we can replace them, and you can get into them. No matter how deep the LED is buried, it's never unretrievable. It just depends on how far you're willing to go to correct that issue. So now for me, I wouldn't leave a failed LED if I could help it. If it was a personal build, I definitely wouldn't. This is a client's build and the client doesn't want it to be left. Fair enough, I am in complete agreement. So we're going to fix it. So the LED in question is the counterpart to this lower pylon. You can see this is the light that splashes that nice floodlight up the inside of, on the outside of the pylon there. So let me just quickly spin this around and I'll show you the dead guy, so to speak. So there it is, that one there, dead as a dodo. So I need to get at that, and as you can probably gather, it's probably in the worst place for access, because if it was this failed LED back here, that's fairly easy. I'll just chop the end off and change and get into that LED there, or I'll drill out the top there. If it was something along the front, again, it's just a case of cutting the front off, possibly, you know, that sort of thing, or popping the dish out or something like that and getting in at the front. But this guy right there, right in the middle of the secondary hull, is completely underneath this structure here, so I can't go from the top. I've got to come in from the side. Worst possible scenario. So, but never mind, it doesn't matter. This stuff is plastic. It's all just plastic and paint. Whatever I do now, it will get fixed. Remember, when we buy these things, they already come in bits in the box, so it doesn't matter if you have to turn it back into bits before we can get it fixed again. So this video is just going to be showing you the process that I'm going to take to get this LED fixed. Now, my hope is that it is just the LED and it's not something else feeding the LED. I think it is only the LED, because the other ones that are on the circuit, like these top ones that you can barely see, and the other one on the other side, they're working. It's just this guy. So, and you can just about see through some of the window masks that the internal lights are also, the window lights are lit up in there. So I am 99% sure it is that LED. Having said that, I don't know that for sure, and I won't know that until I've got in there. So what my plan is at this point in time, and this is subject to change because plans never survive first contact, is I'm going to cut into this panel some way, cut a window in there, get at the LED, see if I can get it out of the hull far enough that I can get the wires exposed enough, trim up the LED off, reconnect some longer leads, get a new LED on there, and try and aim it back in position and get it firing back up this pylon with keyhole surgery. Now, that sounds like a real massive pain, and it probably will be. So all of that preamble is out of the way. We're going to do some proper drilling and grinding and some untold violence. We're going to cut a nasty big hole in the side of this ship, going to get that LED sorted out, going to repair it, and by the end of this video it will look just like that again. That's the aim. Let's find out. Alright, so this is going to be a little bit fly on the wall. You might not be able to see some of what I'm doing here, and it's going to be a bit rough and ready camera wise, but it is what it is. Let's just sort of do the best I can. So yeah, like I said just a minute ago, my idea is that I'm going to cut out just this small window here somewhere. I'm thinking, originally I was thinking I was just cut out behind the LED where it's mounted just behind here without disturbing this, because then that might make it easier sort of aiming it. But I'm sort of questioning that now, whether I should take this out with it, because then at least I've maintained, you know, I've got this part that I can then remount and try and get it flush back with the hull again, and then don't know, I'm sort of talking myself back out of it again now. Tell you what, let's just cut a window there. We'll leave this intact for now. If I need to, I'll just extend the cut and take more away, but for now I'm just going to cut a window out. Now I'm going to use a scalpel blade to start off with, to give me like a decent set of scribe lines or guidelines, and then I'll move on to the plastic cutter that you've probably seen me use in other videos. This thing, it's like a scribe tool, but it's actually a plastic cutting tool, but I'll come to that in a sec. Another thing I should mention while I do this is I've got some pictures of while I was building it, some work in progress photos, which I tend to do anyway just to keep the client updated, but for stuff like this it's invaluable because I put all this in there months ago at this point, and there's no way I'd remember where all this stuff is without those photos, so I'm glad I've got them. Right, there we go, the deed is done, we're committing now. Come hell or high water, this LED will be repaired. Now, I'm trying not to be too precious about where I'm making this opening, because there's no nice, neat, clean way to tear open a ship, so, or, you know, anything. But a little bit of pride in your work don't go amiss, I think. This pylon is in exactly the wrong place. I just can't get my hand anywhere comfortable to get this top cut, but never mind. Now again, I'm sort of in two minds what I'm going to do here in terms of repairing this. The obvious thing to do would be to really carefully cut this window out, keep the plastic part, and then fit it later, which may well end up doing, but it's going to take me forever to cut through the plastic like this. And while yes, it will give me a nice neat panel to go back in there, it could also be argued that it's small enough that it doesn't really matter what I use. I could just use epoxy putty to refill this hole in the end. Whenever, you know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's getting sanded and body worked again anyway, so could argue that I don't need to keep it. It may well just be easier just to drill straight out. But then again, all these questions, if I was just to go driving a drill down through there, I'm not exactly sure where all the wires are now since I assembled it, because of the photos I've got are before the strong back and neck piece was put in place. So, and there was a bunch of wiring on there, those, and when you get wiring closed up and joined, things tend to change places, you know, not exactly where you might think they are. So I don't really want to go smashing drills through there, because I might go through something else and cause even more problems. Let's see how we get on with this plastic cutter. I'm making a mess now. Now, I'm not worrying about slipping too much because, like I say, I'm making a massive hole in this thing, so all these little blemishes they'll be dealt with. And one thing that I will say about this old smoothie kit, which I might have mentioned before, is the plastic is rock hard, and it's about feels like it's 5mm thick. So it's going to take a bit of convincing to get open. But like I said, we will prevail. Now I'm not left-handed, so I'll try not to make a mess of this. So I'm going to carry on doing this for a little bit and see how I get on. There's no need for you to see all of this. You can be bored to tears otherwise. So I'll be back in a sec. Okay, that looks pretty terrible, right? Don't panic, don't panic. It'll all be fixed. Right, that took a little bit of work, but between that plastic cutter and then finishing off again with the scalpel, I was managed to punch through this ridiculously thick plastic. God, they don't make them like they used to. Right, so let's see if I can peel up this window. Hope you can see this. Again, it kind of is what it is. There's not a lot I can do about it, but I hope you can see it. And I hope this pops out. Oh, there we go. So, there's a panel. We'll keep that for now, because you never know. Tell you what, just so you can see. Look how thick that plastic is. You get 2 kits out of the same amount of plastic these days. Anyway, right, so can we see down in there? It's very dark. I think the next thing I need to do is get it plugged back in again and at least get some power in there so the windows come back on. So just bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to hot wire this real quick. Talk amongst yourselves. There we go. So we've got a bit of light. I don't know if you can see in there. Maybe a bit of shaky cam. Hold on, I'll take you off the stand. Wait a minute. Just bear with. Right. So you can kind of see what's going on in there. Now that black thing, let me just get a poking implement. This black thing I think is the back of this heat shrink tube that I was using as a bit of a telescope, sort of, you know, to sort of focus the beam. So hopefully, if I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing, I should be able to just poke that away and carefully pick that away and then try and get it out of this opening. And it might mean I have to open this up a little bit more to get that out, but if that's the case, then so be it. But I'm going to see if I might have to drill down through there carefully and just get rid of all this so I know so I can see what I'm doing. But yeah, this is a two-handed job, I'm afraid, so I'm going to have to put you back on the stand and you may or may not see what I'm doing. But revelation, after all that, the LED hasn't actually failed. You see that light splashing there, if the camera will focus on it? That's the LED. What I've done is sort of poked and prodded at the heat shrink tube and exposed a little bit of the bulb. Basically what I did was use heat shrink tube as like a focusing sort of method to get a nice spotlight going up onto this pylon. And I think what might have happened is the heat of the resistor and everything in the enclosed space while the LED has been running over various testing and all the rest of it has continued to shrink under the heat, and it's pulled the LED out of alignment, and instead of having a nice straight run up that pylon, the light got blocked. Because now I've moved it, you can just about make out, can you make that out if the camera will focus? There's light coming out of the end of that, you see? There is light coming out of it now. Now it's not aimed properly, so I still need to deal with that, but that's good news. At least it means the LED didn't actually fail, so that's something, I guess. Doesn't change the fact now that I still have a gaping hole in the side of the ship, and I still need to get that pin spot back up onto that pylon somewhere or another. So that it might even still mean replacing that bulb. Definitely I'll have to replace this heat shrink tube because it's definitely not doing the job. So I'm going to scratch my head over this for a little bit. But good news and bad news, mixed bag. But there we go. Went better than I thought so far, but things could change. So fingers crossed, and hold your breath. Okie dokie. So as you can see, I've got the LED free and it is fine and working, and I've managed to clear out the aperture for the light. So I just need to figure out now a way of getting some kind of focusing thing on the end of this, like a tube or something, and feeding it through there. Or there's just enough wire without pulling that too much. I can probably trim those off and just extend the leads a little bit maybe, and change the LED. I've got those 2mm like, what are they called, lighthouse LEDs, the like square at the bottom with a really thin sort of protrusion on the top. I might try one of those just to see if it fits through that aperture or not. Not sure, but I've got options, more options than I thought I'd have. So all in all, pretty good news. So I'm going to leave it here for now. It's getting late, late at night, past my bedtime. So I'm going to go and catch 40 winks, think this over a bit more, and we'll see if I can fix this mess. Okay, things have progressed a little bit. So as you can see, I've decided that it would be easier to deal with the new light install and get it aimed in thereabouts the right direction if I cut the aperture out and had that as a drop-in part as well. So made even more of a mess, some more slips with the knife, managed to get straight through that long window. But you won't see that. I've already turned the lights on and tested it. You don't see the scratch or anything through the actual clear part, so that's fine, nothing to worry about. By the time this is all repaired, you'll never know it's there, so don't tell anyone. So I think I mentioned a few minutes ago about these lighthouse LEDs, and basically this is what I was talking about. You've probably seen these before. They're like a square LED. You see that it's got a square body and then like a 2mm round protrusion coming out the top of it. Really handy LEDs, and really good for this kind of thing. I didn't have any of these when I started this build, so I used standard 3mm LEDs, same way I've used them many times in the past. So this one, I've just wrapped it in foil tape and tried to just get the light coming out of the front there, because I don't want light from this LED soaking and like blasting into the inside of the ship and starting to colour these windows and all the rest of it. I don't want that to happen. I want this to be a self-contained sort of light source. So I've covered it with foil tape, and I was lucky that when I cut this panel out, this aperture, you can see there's still remnants, if you can see it. I'm not sure if the camera's picking that up. There's remnants of the super glue that I used to fit the old sort of focusing tube, and it's thereabouts pointing it in the direction it needs to be pointed at. So if I just slip that in there gently like that, that will point up into that pylon thereabouts with a little bit of tweaking. So let me just throw the switch on this power supply and I'll illustrate. Now I've got the power supply wound down quite a bit. It's only about 2.5 volts, which is quite low, but these floodlights are really quite dim anyway. They're not supposed to be really overpowering. Now you probably can't see that until I switch this light off. But there you go. Obviously I'm only holding this in position, and I can adjust where the flood sort of comes up. You see that? How about that? You can kind of get an idea. Obviously when I come to fit this back in place properly, I'll be able to tweak it ever so slightly, and then any discrepancy in the surface is going to be dealt with anyway. So that's looking really nice. The colour tone maybe won't match perfectly between the others, but hopefully you won't notice it too much. That's just something that we can't really avoid. I suppose I might be able to try and tint it a little bit with some Tamiya paint, but not sure how far I'll chase that, because once it's tinted it's really hard to take the tint off, and I don't want to start messing around skewing the colours too much. So yeah, looking pretty good. So the next problem I need to solve is how I'm going to get this connected to the circuit on the inside, and then get it all tucked back inside and tidied up, and get the massive gaping wound closed up and repaired, and as if it had never happened at all. So I think what I'm going to do is just nip that LED off right where the tip of the resistor is, just desolder it there and there, and try and drop that straight in. I might end up having to add another resistor because these LEDs are very bright, but I'll see how the intensity is with just this LED. If I need to add another one, I will do, and there's plenty of room still inside there, and I'll just be able to feed the wiring back into that space, and we should be good to go. Right, it's a bit of a hot wire job, but I've managed to get the LED, or the new LED, on the original resistor. So it's quite a lot brighter than the other two. You can't really see it from that angle. Well, maybe you can. You perhaps see it on the inside of this pylon. It is very much brighter, and I think there's two things happening there. One, the different type of LED is focusing the light differently. Like I said, I used on the other ones the standard 3mm LEDs with heat shrink tube acting as like a focusing mechanism, for lack of a better term. This type of LED doesn't need that, so it's throwing a lot more light right out at the tip than my other floodlights are. So the other thing I think is happening is, or the reason it's a lot brighter, is that the apertures of the others are a lot smaller than this. This is like 2mm. Like the lit face of the aperture is 2mm wide. The others aren't anywhere near that because of the amount that the heat shrink tube has shrank. The inner diameter is nowhere near 2mm. So what I'm going to try and do before I start stacking resistors and pulling the overall brightness down is I'm just going to cover the end up with foil tape, completely blank it off, and then use a drill and just open up a tiny little hole right on the end face of the that tower. So instead of being 2mm, it'll be, I don't know, less than 1mm, and see what that looks like. It might still be really bright, but it might pull that splash narrower, so it might look a little bit more like, so it matches the rest. So I'm going to try that. I'll see if I can get it on camera. It's going to be really fiddly and you might not see what I'm doing. My hands are probably going to get all in the way, but let's see how it looks anyway. Okay, I think I'm onto something here. It's looking a lot better than it was. It's about half the brightness than it was just a few minutes ago, and I haven't stacked any extra resistors onto it yet. I may still do that. You can't see and I can't really show you, but judging by how the other LED looks, or the other floodlight looks, it is very, very close in brightness and sort of cone as well, like the shape that it's thrown up onto that pylon. So I think it's going in the right direction. Obviously it's not sitting quite in the right place, so the throw is out, the aim is out, but I can deal with that. What I've done is gone back to good old heat shrink tube. Now yeah, before you say it, I know the definition of madness is repeating the same thing twice and expecting different results, but it's not quite the same thing. So let me just gently pull this up out of here. So hopefully you can see that there's a tiny length of heat shrink tube just right on the end of that protrusion on the LED. Now what I've done is allowed it to overhang maybe 1mm, if that, and then heat shrink it so it's contracted to its smallest diameter, but there's such a small length overshooting and choking down that there's not enough now to close up and collapse. Previously on the old sort of arrangement, that was a lot longer. It was probably 4 or 5 mil. So although it was fairly rigid, it wasn't completely rigid. And I think as it's warmed up through time and things have sort of pulled against it on the inside of the wiring and stuff like that, it might have kinked it, and it might have collapsed it that way. I'm not sure. It's just sort of educated guesswork, but I think that's the only way that it could have happened. So this can't happen with this because it's so small. There's nowhere for it to go. It can't collapse any more than that, and it's doing a good job of really restricting that cone, and that, along with the actual plastic as well, sort of closing it in even more. I think we're getting a good sort of throw of light on there. Looks really good to the eye. So all I need to do now is potentially add an extra resistor to this. I might try that and just see how it looks, see if it brings it down even more. Failing that, I think it's just a case of getting it permanently wired again, getting the wires fed back into the body of the model, and then getting this stuff secured back in place, getting it aimed nice and tight. Once it's all in, that'll be it. It'll be a case of filling in the hole and repairing all this nasty damage that's been caused. So let's move on to that. Alright, there we go. I've double stacked another resistor on there, another 470 ohm resistor, just to dial it back even more, and it looks really good now. So you can see I've closed up the connections and left myself plenty of excess. So I can just tuck that in there, get the aperture panel. You can't see a thing because my hands are in the way. Don't drop that in there because that would be a nightmare to get out. That'd just be the icing on the cake, wouldn't it, if I just go and drop this straight through that hole. Let's not do that. Let's bump the camera instead. There we go. Fairly decent spot, and again, you can't see the other side, but I can by looking underneath it, and it looks pretty good. About as close as I could hope to get anyway. You're not really going to notice much difference, if any, all being well. So once I've got it positioned properly, we should be good to go. So there you go. Up next, let's get it all put back together and like we were never there. We're winning. We are winning. I've just tacked the panel in place just along the back there with some thin CA. So I'm just going to run a little bead around the edges, top and bottom now. It shouldn't be disturbed too far, and basically all I'm doing is just dropping a little bit in and letting it flow into the gap. As much as it will. It doesn't matter that it makes a bit of a mess on the surface. In fact, I'm encouraging that, because it's all going to be sanded back down anyway to get a really nice, clean, smooth surface again. Going back to how I made the grid lines back in one of the earlier videos, showing how to fill in grid lines and stuff like that with CA. So basically, it's a variation on that technique. I'm just using the CA to act as a filler, which would be nice and hard and robust enough that I can sand it perfectly smooth and then rescribe the panel lines, and you'll never know. So there's plenty on there now, so I'm going to leave that be, let it settle. CA, when it dries, shrinks a little bit anyway, particularly if you hit it with some kicker, which I won't do this time. I'm just going to let it cure on its own naturally. Yeah, so it'll shrink away, and it'll probably need topping up again, but that panel is nice and solid. So once that has done its thing for a few minutes, I'll do the same with the first part that I cut out. This part, I'll do the same thing with that, get it in place next to it as best I can, fill all of the gaps, and start the facial reconstructive surgery. after dropping that panel inside the model and playing the world's hardest game of hook a duck to get it back out again, which was no easy feat, let me tell you. Finally got it back all in one piece. Like I said before, I've just ran loads of CA into those gaps and let it flow into these scars where I slipped with the knife and the scoring tool. And once the CA is nice and hardened, I'll be able to sand those smooth. You'll never see that they were there, and you know, a few layers of primer and a little bit more rescribing in the panel lines, and it will be as if nothing ever happened. So yeah, there you go. Troublesome, yes. Problematic, yes. Not easy by any stretch, but doable. All you need to do is just be, you know, persistent with it, and just, you know, don't be scared and worried about taking drastic measures, because like I said before, it's just plastic and paint. You know, whatever happens, it can be repaired, so it's just a matter of time and patience. So the next time you see this, it will be nice and body worked up and preened up. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time tomorrow after the CA has had a chance to cure properly overnight and get it all sanded and smoothed away. But I won't bother showing all of that, because, you know, don't want to show you how to suck eggs. So next time you see this, hopefully it'll be as if nothing ever happened and would never been in there and cut such a massive gash into the side of this ship. Right, there we go. That is the completed repair. You would never know that such damage was done to replace that light if you hadn't watched these videos, but there you go. So that just goes to show that with a little bit of extra effort and, you know, being willing to sort of backtrack a few steps, these sorts of things are totally solvable. So I hope that helps with any sort of issues that you might come up with in your projects. They do happen. If you think they're not going to happen, you're kidding yourself. You just have to be willing to deal with it. So there we go. So you might also notice that I've put the saucer section in place and cleaned up the edge. Now, I hadn't intended on doing that yet. My initial plan was to get everything sort of base coated and basically painted, and then assemble the saucer and then deal with the seam around the edge. But the edge being what it was, it would have been more work and it wouldn't have been worth it. The whole idea was to sort of make it easier painting under here when the saucer's not attached. You just got a little bit more like access under there, sort of unrestricted access. But you know, the benefits of doing that were totally outweighed with the benefits of putting this saucer on and dealing with the seam as it is now. So I've done that. So nothing else left to say now other than this will get its coat of white primer and then the first base coat. So the next video will be getting into painting this thing. So thanks for watching this one. It's been a bit of a change in direction, but we'll be back on track for the next video. So I'll catch you in a bit.